Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2014. It's, well, this is the news, right? I heard this during my break at work, and it's kind of weird to hear real news being talked about, even though, this whole thing could be diluted as a push against sovereignty of the Ukrainian people, and Russia wanting to get a stake and the West getting the stake. So basically, we're not going to, unless you're Ukrainian on the ground, you don't really know what's happening and what the 100% truth is on the situation. But we know that they rejected a bid for the EU and the Russians, and their puppets in that government were kind of overthrown, so they had their prime minister resign. So a lot of changes in Ukraine. The people there are trying to change something for the better, trying to better their lives there. So the globalists don't like that, whether it's in the East trading bloc, such as Russia, China, or the West trading bloc. Yeah, usually, like one of the persons I work with said, "Oh, let's see what's happening in celebrity news." I'm like, "Oh, let's see, Miley Cyrus wrote out on a giant tongue. I don't know what it is with her and the tongue thing. It's probably some kind of programming for young people, but either way, it just seems to be just sick and disgusting, and many people are turned off by her. It seems, but it doesn't really matter because the powers that be will still push her as a global icon for global programming in the culture industry, and she's so it doesn't really, she doesn't have to be effective or make or be a good singer or anything like that, kind of like some actors, as long as they push the programming. Anyways, back to what we were talking about with what's going on in the EU and the Ukraine. I've been out of touch with news, so I haven't been following any news prior to this really, and this kind of just gave me a spark to, within the fastest time that I could, within less than 45 minutes, to put together some news. So, of course, the mainstream media is covering this. They're seizing control. 25 people were dead, and they said it raised fears of prolonged violence. So, the first thing I thought was they're gonna treat this like kind of like Syria and say this is a humanitarian issue, right? And that they need to get the global community involved. That sounds very democratic, but it has nothing to do with any kind of democracy. It's basically, again, a small group of people who run financial interests around the world, and they're not happy that things aren't going as fast, like in Syria, which we'll get to in this video. So they're going to find a way in there as a humanitarian issue into Ukraine's issues, their national issues. Yeah, it says here, well, one thing is they're declaring a nationwide anti-terror operation, an anti-terror operation against acts of terror. So, I mean, most of these governments are run by Zionist puppets, or it could be any type of puppet that's not loyal to those indigenous people, the indigenous population there, will be treated as a terrorist once they rise up. Again, another thing I talked about today during our break. Pretty interesting. We don't usually have conversations like that. But I was like, and they're like, man, they don't, I was like, they don't mess around. And it's because someone said that. And I'm like, yeah, over there in Europe, they don't fuck around, man. Pardon my French there, excuse my language, but sometimes it's needed to set the tone, and that's the tone that I laid out for them, which is, these older people, a lot of them, and younger people, that they're very disengaged, but they still believe in the political system. They believe they can push a button. I'm like, those people over there get rowdy, right? And things tend to change for them for the better. So they've already had this set up, and I've covered this in the last 4 years about how the U.S. and I think everyone else has beaten this issue to death as far as militarizing the police state, federalizing local police, state police, and basically turning them into a form of martial law. So not going to be troops coming to your door. The militarized police are already there, and they have all the programming set in place on television for them to think that they're badasses and that they've been chosen by the people to wear black mask and a ski mask and beat down people's doors and tase little children and stuff. If they're not there, they're justified, because if they're not there, then the terrorists are going to come out of the woodwork and take over, and it'll be anarchy. So yeah, that's why they kind of view them as the terrorist. Kind of moving on here. I want to get moving. Ukrainian ultras, new challenge to the West. This is from RT, January 28th. This was January 28th, almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago of this year. So it's already been on the radar for the globalists. So this is a good opportunity for them to carry out a type of psychological operation. And it's not just that, psyops, for the quote, they've put this through the feed in the media, and people are supposed to react, and then they just go ahead and do whatever the hell they were going to do, and then people say, well, something must be done, because they're told that something must be done. So when something is done, they feel as if they had some kind of participation in it, right? And they didn't, and that's why, Americans are really bad about that. They just keep thinking that they're free and prosperous. So, but the Europeans, not so much. But yeah, we're talking about fomenting unrest, which is again, it creates a humanitarian issue. International community steps in, and this is what here at Blacklisted they're saying, that they think, of course, that the American Israeli Zionists are behind the civil unrest in the Ukraine. What were they talking about with this ultras? They're talking about nationalists. So anyone that is for national sovereignty is ultimately immediately deemed a racist. Now, there are some that are racialists, and there's some that are just nationalists. Never mind if you don't want to have any, anything to do with a state or a nation at all, and you want to live like all of these Europeans lived, like Africans or South Americans, or I'd imagine, like Mongolians. They all lived in a more localized, tribal way of living. So again, that's my take if you've watched my videos for a while. So but I just look at things different. If you want to have nationalism, okay, cool. But they're going to call them ultras, because anything that's outside of what the current order is, which are puppets, a puppet regime in place that can call it whatever it is, a republic, a democracy, a parliament. It's just like an economic dictatorship. Some people call it a technocracy or a scientific dictatorship. Basically, people don't know that they're not free. But in Europe, these nationalists, they could be old ladies, they could be whatever. But these revolutions, a lot of times you can't trust them. You don't know if they're Western type intelligence or Eastern intelligence operations. But they do fear the nationalists, because they've been very strong and getting stronger, because they're supporting. These aren't just fringe elements of the Greek society. These are police. These are academics. These are people, regular people, that are pissed off with the EU that was imposed on them, again, not democratically, and their lives, their standards of living are going to shit. So, and they see it. You can only say a lie so much until people are like, you know what, F you, we ain't living in this utopia, right? This American dream. See, that's what I said. Americans, they're too asleep through entertainment and whatever, that they're not awake to see that it's a nightmare. And it is a dream. Oh, yeah, so this is just what happened January 28th, about a month ago. Ukraine Prime Minister resigns amid unrest. The parliament revokes anti-protest laws. So they're going to create anti-protest laws. The police in the UK actually wanted to ban protests altogether. So, yeah, Moscow blames radicals for deadly clashes in Ukraine. Remember, anyone that actually creates some real change and poses a threat to the public governments, they will be deemed as terrorists, and all the infrastructure and apparatuses are in place for that, and especially in America. If they ever decide to get off their asses and do something, or just do something peacefully, you don't have to get violent. So, like I said, it's different for everybody. So, yeah, EU leaders are pondering sanctions against the puppet government or whoever's representing them, right? Maybe it's the people actually have someone there doing something, representing them, actually representing them. Who knows? But the international community is going to step in. Yeah, Ukraine region declares independence, sending dollar bonds to record low, and Russian ruble tumbles to 5 euro. So both the Russians and the Eastern Trading Bloc, Russia's and the U.S., the West, they all lose out of this. So I'm sure there'll be winners, though. Russia and Gazprom provided 29% of gas supplies to Europe in 2013. So the West doesn't like that. They're trying to build their own gas line, which is what a lot of Syria is about. Besides creating refugees, besides sending them into, they're not sending them to Qatar. They're not sending them to Saudi Arabia. I mean, I want to be able to speak freely about this because this is what is happening. I think 108 Morris, he's in India doing what he's doing, but he's mentioned this and he did make me think about it. They're creating refugees and they're sending them to North America, to Canada, the United States, and Europe. These were mostly traditionally white countries. So they're doing this for a strategic reason, creating thousands, if not, I would imagine, at least 1 million refugees like they did in Iraq. So, but besides that, it's financial, right? To compete with almost like a monopoly. They want to have a duopoly of energy, right? You got the East with Gazprom, and you got the West run through that Leviathan pipeline that Israel has a big stake in, right around Lebanon and that part of the world. But yeah, it's funny, just a side note, Ukraine was actually, what they would do, the Russians would do with the Ukraine is they'd have these agreements of setting prices. So it sounds very free market, but setting prices and agreements of how much they're going to supply of natural gas to Ukraine. And these deals would go and they would, basically Ukraine would get screwed because it'd be freezing cold. I mean, it gets freaking cold there. And people would start getting really, really cold, freezing. People would start dying. And they do this every year. And then eventually they just sign the contract, which, they're probably going to pay more than they really should be. So supposedly this gas pipeline run through Syria is going to create some kind of, competition and lower price for people in Europe. But again, as far as what's going on in Syria, I heard it on the radio. NPR covers it to death. They get these people on there saying, "Ooh, the government." They just keep saying that the civilians are getting killed, and that the government's doing it. It's just unbelievable. They're still playing out that narrative after I've been gone for, a couple months. They're still playing that narrative out. And you know what? People will buy that shit, especially American liberals that listen to NPR and don't just do their own research like we're doing here. Because it's very blatantly obvious that, and one of them, they actually interviewed one of the opposition rebels or terrorists, which they're mostly comprised of. They actually interviewed them. And said he was complaining because he wasn't getting medical treatment. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're literally going to have this terrorist on there, or at least a guy that's working with terrorists, killing, blowing up mosques, blowing up Catholic churches, abducting clergy. Let's not even talk about blowing up suicide bombs outside schools, killing children, holding entire towns like homes hostage, not allowing food and some medical supplies, people dying, of all kinds of things, and these are done by the opposition that the West is supporting, and they get these people on there on NPR to bitch and moan that they're not getting, that the government wasn't helping them with medical supplies. I mean, I couldn't believe that, but I guess we should, right? I mean, it's the same people that were shooting at the government troops. The government troops are trying to go in there and give aid to these people that are still there. But yeah, U.S. Arab allies meet to further back militants. Again, nothing's really changed since I left February 19th. So they want to bolster the terrorists in Syria so they can lay their pipeline and create refugees. European Commission seizes frozen Syrian assets. They're going to go ahead and take their money like they did in Libya, right? In order to fund the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons. They got cash had to come somewhere, right? Speaking of similar situation, Libya, right? Militias in Libyan capital are demanding the parliament resign. I'm not sure if these were the ones that were local to Gaddafi's clans, the Kakwa and Sawak, but they've been threatening to intervene in elections, or prior to that, for about a week now. The prime minister is spinning it as an attempted coup. That's what the globalists want, really. I mean, like in Iraq, like they're doing in Syria. They just want them fighting each other, killing each other. And Americans, you'll actually hear them say this. Oh, just let those towelheads kill each other off. Who cares? The State Department's PSYOP goes wrong when the Pussy Riot members were beaten with horse rits by the Cossacks at the Olympics. Yeah, and in Thailand they're trying to do it peacefully. Thank you.